Hey, this is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and a few days ago we posted a blind test of the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 versus the Realme 1 versus the Redmi Note 5 Pro, and I promised you guys that I'll be putting up a detailed camera comparison next day, but I didn't. That's how lazy I am. But with all the encouraging comments that you have been giving us and all the love that you've shown us, I finally decided to make that detailed camera comparison, and here it is. Before jumping into the video, like any other robot there, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also click that bell icon so that you get notified for all the videos that we put out. Now let's get into this video. Now before I open my laptop and we all sit together to analyze those pictures, let's quickly take a look at the specs of these phones. Here is a sheet you can take a look at all the camera specifications. If you want to pause the video, you can and take a deeper look, but I think I'll move on now to the pictures. And now that you've taken your long look at it, let's get to work. So now we are back to the table and let's take a look at all these images one by one and let's see which one does the best. So taking a look at the first image we have here, I think the Redmi, the Asus Zenfone, the Realme, all of them have produced very good looking images here. I think taking a look at them one after the other, you won't really see a difference. The details are also very well preserved in all these images. Although looking at them side by side, I think the Asus Zenfone clearly has sharper details. Now that might also be a bit too over sharpened for a lot of you. For me personally, it's fine. The Realme one has least details when zoomed in and is an overall softer image. And the Redmi Note 5 Pro has an overall balanced image. I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro also nails the color accuracy and the temperature here. So for the first set of images, I think I will go with the Redmi Note 5 Pro just because of the true to life color reproduction and balanced detail, with the Asus actually following it and the Realme one coming in at last. Now this next image is a very busy image, and looking at them one by one, I think you can realize that the Realme one does stand out, being the brightest of the bunch. And also the Realme one has managed to identify the subject well. This is a difficult image because the background has a very bright source, which is why the other two images are a bit on the darker side, but the Realme one chose to blow out the background a bit more in order to accommodate the subject in autofocus mode. Now zooming in, I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro takes the cake here. It's a lot more detail and the balance is really well done. I think my winner is still the Realme one here. That's because I'm looking at it more from a consumer point of view. So when you take these images, a lot of you might not really want to edit it much or want a true to life image. You might prefer something that just looks good and you can post it straight to Instagram or Facebook with those little filters. And I think for that, the Realme one does a really good job here. The Redmi Note 5 Pro is no slouch, and I think it has created a better image in terms of true to life color and the balance, but I think Realme one image looks brighter and is my choice for this set of images. Now taking a look at the next image, this was specifically chosen to take a look at how HDR performs on these phones. So the first image that you see here are non-HDR images. I think we see a pattern here. Looking at them separately, they all look very similar, but looking at them side by side, there are a lot more things to notice. I think we can all agree that the Realme one image looks the brightest and also looks quite appealing from a distance. The colors look good, the sky also looks well exposed, and overall I think it looks great. Now zooming into the dark corner at the bottom of this image, I think we'll all see how differently these phones handle different situations. So the Redmi Note 5 Pro seems to have completely messed up the details, while the Asus Zenfone has tried to preserve and bring a lot of detail, but at a cost of a lot of noise. The Realme one image, while it has softer details, looks the best among the three here. It's difficult to pick a winner here, and please make sure to go back to what I've said earlier, because then your preferences might differ from mine and you can calibrate your choices depending on what I say. But in this image, I'd still pick the Realme one because of how overall that image looks good from outside. And I said earlier, I would like to pick images that would look good on Instagram or Facebook, or what general consumers would go for, and that is the image that I've picked with the Realme one. Now moving on to the HDR images, this is where we finally start to see a lot of differences. So what Asus Zenfone does here is quite straightforward, with just preserving the details in the highlights by bringing them down and boosting the shadows up. This way the image just looks a tad bit better. But I have to tell you something here, the HDR shot on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro takes a lot of time. Now that's not really that much because of the hardware, because it's really powerful, but that is mainly because of an average performing camera that sits on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. Now looking at the Realme one image, is that it has the most drastic HDR effect, and I can't really say that I'm a fan, because apart from bringing down the highlights and basically bringing out details in the shadows, it also cranks up the saturation up a bit, and I think you can really see the difference in the greens that the OPPO Images brought. So as I said earlier, I'm not a fan of this HDR effect. Now going to the Redmi Note 5 Pro. The Redmi Note 5 Pro is known to be subtle with the HDR effect, and that's what has happened here. The highlights have been brought out and the contrast seems to be a little up. I generally prefer the Redmi Note 5 Pro's HDR effect, and the story is no different here. Because while I do like shots a bit saturated, I don't like adding it this unnaturally as the OPPO has done. So I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro's HDR image is my favorite one here. Now let's take a look at some portrait mode images. So now I think this is the first image where the Asus Zenfone Max has impressed me somewhat. The colors look quite good, even the greens and blues in the backgrounds look very refreshing. The Realme 1 image looks a bit washed out, and while the colors look good, I don't think I like it that much. Now coming to the Redmi Note 5 Pro, I think there is not much to say here. The image looks the most well balanced and well produced out of the bunch in terms of color reproduction and balance. Now I think zooming in, you can see that the Redmi Note 5 Pro shines with better details, with Asus Zenfone in the second spot and Realme 1 coming in at last. Now let's talk about that other 50% of the portrait mode image, which is that bokeh. Bokeh is good on all of them, and they've all handled it differently. The Zenfone and the Redmi just go for it and start the shallow depth of field from the exact place where the edge starts. However, Realme 1 tries to play it safe by starting out with a lighter blur and then moving on to a shallower thing. This way they do lessen the possibility of blurred out parts of the subject, but it also looks a little distasteful. Fun fact that the Pixel 2 also does bokeh mode in such a fashion where they start out with a lighter blur and then max out the blur in the background, but they do it in a very premium way. Now taking a look at selfies, I think the Realme 1 really shines here. The colors, the details, everything is just spot on. The Redmi Note 5 Pro did not exactly focus well, but has managed to produce a good looking image. The Zenfone image is really dull looking here, which actually makes me wonder how inconsistent the post processing is, because generally the back camera images from the Zenfone are a lot saturated and look way too lively for me, and the front camera images look really dull. I think Asus should really take a look at this, and maybe that they fix it in future software updates. Also zooming into these selfies, I think we'll realize that the OPPO has a really good detail on it. All those pores, all those little details on the face are very well preserved on the Realme. So the Realme 1 is my winner here, with the Redmi Note 5 Pro in the second spot and the Asus Zenfone at the last spot. Now taking a look at portrait mode selfies, I think they've all done a good job, and we see similar results that we saw with the back camera portrait mode. The Redmi Note 5 Pro does the best job of all, with the Realme 1 and the Asus coming in behind it, but I think you'll be impressed with either of those phones. The Asus produces little dull looking images, but I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro and the Realme 1 are really good performers when it comes to selfies and selfie portraits. So taking a look at just the bokeh at the portrait mode, I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro wins here, with the Realme 1 coming in at second and the Asus coming in at third. But taking a look at selfies overall, I think Realme 1 is my winner, with the Redmi Note 5 Pro in the second place and Asus in the third place. Now let's jump into some close-up daylight shots. Let's take a look at them one by one first, and then go into how they look side by side. Now looking at these daylight shots, generally when you look at all these images one after the other, you don't really see a difference, but I think we can all agree here that Asus really shit the bed. These are difficult colors for cameras to reproduce, but Asus's photo looks really poor. Here again, the Realme 1 has a brighter image, but I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro really wins here. Colors and contrast, looking at them from a distance, I think Redmi Note 5 Pro has got it right. The Realme 1 image also looks very close to it, albeit with a little less contrast. But as we zoom in is when we see the real story. The Realme 1 shines here. The details are very good, and the Redmi Note 5 Pro's crushed details just look embarrassing in front of how good the Realme 1's image looks. When it comes to close-up images like this, I think I always prefer details, and the Realme 1 has really been my favorite one in this. Now taking a look at this indoor shot, I think the Asus has the brightest image of the bunch, in the sense that all the images are very well exposed, but it's a little too blue for my liking, a little too cool, and there is a lot of noise too. Taking a look at the Redmi Note 5 Pro image, this is my favorite one here. It has more details, less noise, very good color reproduction, and I think the temperature also is quite pleasing on the Redmi Note 5 Pro. The Realme 1 straight out underexposed, the whole image being my least favorite one in this. So the Redmi Note 5 Pro is my pick for this one. The Realme one is the softest of the bunch, and that is something that's expected from Realme because of all the earlier images that Realme has been producing. But it has also managed to click the brightest image. So if you look at it from a distance, I think the Realme one really has the brightest image of all, but the Redmi Note 5 Pro is clearly the winner here. It has the most balanced image. It has the details, the colors and noise control. Everything is just very well done. And the Redmi Note 5 Pro is clearly my pick for this one. Now turning on the flash and looking at some low light flash portraits, the Redmi Note 5 Pro wins this round for me. The Asus has the least appealing image, the colors are off and the details are completely smudged. Now the Realme one and the Redmi Note 5 Pro are very close in these images, and looking at it from a distance, I don't think there is any difference. However, zooming in, I think we can really see that the Redmi Note 5 Pro has a lot more details and is hence my winner for this, with the Realme following very closely. Now in this last image that we are looking at today, the Asus and the Redmi Note 5 Pro both do a good job. However, the Realme one has surprised me with this image. The colors are amazing and the noise levels are very well controlled. Now that is also because Realme generally softens the image a lot and softens the details, but in this low lit situation, I think I prefer softer details than smudged details or a lot of noise. But in this low lit situation, I think I prefer the Realme one image than the Redmi Note 5 Pro or the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. Now moving towards video, I think the Redmi Note 5 Pro has a slight edge here already because of the electronic image stabilization, and I think the color reproduction is also spot on the Redmi Note 5 Pro. The Realme one also does really well with color and is slightly over sharpened, which is very weird. The Asus Zenfone's video has a lot of smudged details and I'm not really a fan of how those videos look. I think you can clearly see that the video from the Redmi Note 5 Pro is really cropped in when compared to the one from the OPPO or even the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1, and that's because the Redmi Note 5 Pro has electronic image stabilization, and for that what the phone does is it crops in and it adjusts the frame so that you don't see any black bars coming in. So that's why the Redmi Note 5 Pro's video is a little bit too cropped in. If you're someone who edits their videos that they take out of their phones, I think you'll be pretty good with the Asus or even the OPPO, because you can achieve similar results to what the Redmi Note 5 Pro is giving with just taking those videos, putting it on a video editing software like Premiere Pro or anything, and just applying a stabilizer on it. What the Redmi Note 5 Pro does on the smartphone, you can do it on a video editor, but clearly a lot of people don't do that, and that's why the Redmi Note 5 Pro is my winner when it comes to video. So the Redmi Note 5 Pro clearly ticked the most number of boxes, but if I'll be honest, I expected more. The Realme one has really surprised me and given the Redmi Note 5 Pro a very tight competition. And the Realme one starts at a much lower starting price of 8,990 rupees, and it's a steal at this price. So that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. This is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and I'm gonna go straight to sleep now. See ya.